if you come up with an idea, or if you've got a point of view, or if you want to deliver a message to someone that you've constructed, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it, that you would be the best person to deliver that message, because after all, you constructed it. It's my idea, so no one knows more about this idea than me because it's my idea. So clearly I am the most knowledgeable person, the person best positioned to communicate that message. But that's not necessarily the case, because we don't just listen to the knowledge or the expertise of someone when we're determining whether or not we should listen to what they've got to say. You know, there's a whole host of other inferences that we actually make. And so that's the inherent challenge here is that, you know, when we construct these ideas, we kind of figure that because they're our ideas, we're the best messenger. And very often that's not the case. But that's a kind of difficult, there's a kind of ego depletion that occurs there, isn't there? You kind of like have to kind of, you know, talk seriously to yourself and, you know, give yourself a bit of a telling off and say, look, good idea. But, you know, when it comes to big frames of family portraits above the fireplace, sister's the best person to deliver the message in that instance. Yeah.
That we're not the Trumps. That was the funniest way to put it for her.
I'm Srini Rao, and this is the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, where you get a window into the stories and insights of the most innovative and creative minds who've started movements, built thriving businesses, written best-selling books, and created insanely interesting art. For more, check out our 500-episode archive at unmistakablecreative.com.
Steve, welcome to the Unmistakable Creative. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
It's great to be with you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah, it is my pleasure to have you here. So I actually came across your book, Messengers, Who We Listen to and Who We Don't Know Why, because your publicist sent it to me. And as somebody who literally hosts a show, which is all about, you know, who we listen to and why we listen to them, I was very, very intrigued by it. But before we get into the content of the book, I want to start asking you, what is one of the most important things that you learned from one or both of your parents that have shaped who you've become and what you ended up doing with your life?
Oh, wow. I guess my answer to that is a lesson that I learned from my father. It wasn't something that he taught me, though. It was something that I observed that he did, and he did it consistently. And I guess it's just kind of rubbed off on me. And he was one of these people who, if he said he was going to do something, he just did it. He wouldn't make excuses for failing to coming through on a promise. You know, he wasn't a procrastinator. He wasn't one of these people that would kind of, you know, in a moment say, "Oh yeah, let me help you with that," and then come up with excuses a few days later as to why he hadn't got round to doing it. And that always impressed me about him. I lost him. Actually, his anniversary is this weekend. It's going to be 20 years. And I think, yeah, that's my, apart from lots of, great memories of the time we had together and the like, that was a quality that he had that I'd like to think that I try my best to live up to.
Why do you think that more people aren't that way? Because if you go to the Landmark Forum, they literally say the definition of integrity is doing what you say you're going to do when you do it in big and small ways. And one of the things they said is that when you do that, you start to actually have the power to speak things into existence. And that always stayed with me, even though I know myself well enough to know that I try really hard to commit to those things, and I do screw up from time to time. Right. Why do you think more people are not like the way your dad was?
Well, I don't think it's a case of they're not necessarily like that. I think when we make these promises, or, when we offer help, or when we even make a commitment to ourselves to do something, be it, exercise a little bit more, or save a little bit more for the future, or try to be a little bit more creative, take a course, whatever it is. I think in our heart of hearts, most of us are actually thinking, yeah, I'm going to get round to doing this. So it's not that we're being, dissonant or we're being capricious. I think, we'd like to think that we're going to get around to doing it, but modern day life is such that stuff gets in the way. And often, even when we have the best of intents, kind of living up to what we say or promise that we're actually going to do can be kind of quite tough. So that's one of the reasons. The other is that this idea of we are largely present tense orientated. We're pretty good at understanding and thinking about what we need and what we want and what we're likely to do in the next 5, 10 minutes, hour, next couple of days even. But that kind of future self is a little bit like a foreign country, and we don't necessarily have the guidebook for it. So, I think we can easily fall into the trap of thinking, well, I probably have the time to do that next week or next month or next quarter. In the case of workplace commitments and things like that, and when that time eventually comes round, our schedules are filled up, other people are competing for our time, other stuff has actually happened. We're so overwhelmed with stuff that that becomes a barrier. It kind of gets in the way. So I don't think it's necessarily that we're just like uncommitted or as I say, capricious about things. But we do find it easy, I think, to kind of procrastinate sometimes in this crazy world that we live in, and all the commitments, all the vies for our attention kind of just helps us to be able to, perhaps not get round to doing those things that we're doing. It's not that we're necessarily losing our integrity. There's some folks out there, clearly, that kind of, I think, might promise or over-promise and under-deliver, because it serves their goals and allows them to, be more dominant or get some traction over others. But I think for most of us, we'd like to be able to live up to the things we do. It's just life gets in the way.
Mm-hmm. So what, if any, was the moment that led you down the path of ending up on this career trajectory? Was there some moment in your life or career, if there was any, that put you on this path?
Yes, there was. And it was nothing that I had any control over, which is kind of interesting because it requires me to admit that the reason I'm doing the things that I'm doing now are largely a function of good fortune and luck. I was working for a large organization, a big corporate. I was doing pretty well there, and even got to start working with some pretty noted experts in the field of the psychology of influence and persuasion. And, the work I was doing with them primarily was concerned with, well, how do we bring their expertise into our business? And then, the company I was working for got acquired by an even bigger company. And I suddenly was at that crossroads in a career. Do I, become an even smaller fish in an even bigger pond, or, do I kind of branch out? And, the opportunity was there to continue the work, but, on my own terms as a self-employed individual. And, so I started working with the team in the US, and that was 20 years ago, and haven't looked back since. So, a lot of hard work, a lot of effort, but that pivotal moment came about by something external to me. I would never have planned or considered doing this. But, the situation conspired that, fortunately, and I'm incredibly lucky and grateful for it, that allows me to do now what I do. I genuinely think I have the best job in the world.
In those moments, why do you think that so many people choose the safe and secure, the tried and true path?
Well, because it's known. I think it is safe. Mm-hmm. We are, I think, largely risk averse. Now, it's not to say that everyone, always takes the safe option, but a lot of us do, because the future is uncertain. It's unknown, and our past behaviors, our past experiences are the best, I guess, map or kind of. Yeah, they kind of the best place that we can look to predict how life is going to pan out in the future. And so that, doing what we've always done or taking the safe option kind of makes lots of sense. So it does take sometimes a different way of thinking, some enforced circumstance sometimes as well. I think, looking back, I'll never be able to know this for certain, but looking back to that moment when that change occurred, I wasn't offered necessarily the options on a plate with a roadmap for how each would actually pan out. It's largely enforced on me. And I think sometimes these external forces conspire to kind of create a situation where we make a different decision than we maybe ordinarily would. And sometimes that's quite a good thing. It kind of forces us to be resilient. It forces us to kind of take a step into the unknown. And I wouldn't say that what I did was especially kind of innovative or risky, because, I'd still had like 8-9 years experience at a big global organization. That was never going to be taken off my resume. So, I probably had 6-12 months, and if it hadn't worked out in the first 6 to 12 months, then I could always probably go back cap in hand and say, hey, look, I tried a little experiment, didn't quite work out. Can I come back? So I wouldn't say it was an over risky decision that was actually made, but it felt risky at the time.
It's funny. I think 21, if I remember correctly. I was interning at Sun Microsystems. I had a job that I hated, basically working in the research lab, and I was an economics major, so I had no business being there at all. And I was just doing this really mind-numbing project, which was effectively putting people's resumes online. But I did an informational interview with a sales guy, and he agreed to meet me. And he was a young guy. I think he was, probably 25 or so. And I walked into his office, and he told me something that I never forgot. He said, I bet you have your whole life planned out, and I'm here to tell you that none of it will go according to plan. And boy, was he right.
Oh, absolutely. So I doubt you know this about me, but I write a monthly column for one of the airlines, British Airways, the in-flight magazine, that kind of rag that goes in the seat pocket in front of you. And I've just finished yesterday writing the column for, I think it's May or whenever it may be. And I wrote about an old boss of mine. And one of the things he was used to kind of enjoy saying, he'd walk around the office and say to his executives the same line. It was something along the lines of, if you want to make God really laugh, you really should show him your business plan. And it's kind of like, he was right, because, his point being that, once you've written down your plan and you've put all the resources against it and the budgets and all this kind of stuff, and you probably bound it up and turned it into a PowerPoint presentation and shared it with 50 other people, the only thing you can guarantee that it contains is something that's probably not going to happen. So he had this kind of this beautiful way of kind of, essentially pulling the rug from underneath our feet and giving us that reality check. And so I think that story that you've just told me about, the fact that these things are unlikely to happen, that was borne out by, an old boss of mine who would say the same thing. And, he's right.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the ideas in the book. What is it that prompted your interest in writing this book of all the ones you could write? Because I know that, you've worked with, Robert Cialdini, who we've had here as a guest. I know that you teach at you lecture at schools, which I actually do want to talk to you about education, but we'll do it in the context of the book itself. What prompted your exploration of this idea of all the things you could work on?
Well, it just did seem like a natural next step. As you say, I've been working with Bob now for 20 years. That was, the academic that I got the fortune to go work with in that crossroads in my life, and we wrote a book together, kind of 2007, 2008, a book called Yes, that was kind of like a practitioner's guide to employing insights from the behavioral sciences, principally influence and persuasion science. And so I'd had a really good scholarship with Bob in terms of what you might put into a message that inclines people towards paying attention to it, inclines people to say yes, grabs people's attention in that instance, persuades them. But it does seem to be the case. And so I'm sitting in this office here now in London. We've got a relatively small meeting room. There's generally 5-6 people in the office most days. And, we'll often sit here and have, lunch together in the meeting room, and we'll talk about stuff that's going on, something we've seen in the news, or, a conversation someone had, with a friend the night before, or whatever. And one of the conversations we kept coming back to was, how is it possible that every day the news seems to throw up another story where someone has said something, someone perhaps in a high position in society, someone with some notoriety, that's clearly not true, yet there are people out there that believe it. How is that possible? And actually, invariably, then our attention would be drawn to situations where, and I mean, this is a situation. I talk about this, and people go, "Yeah, that's happened to me like so many times you wouldn't believe." It's that occurrence when you have an idea. I don't know, maybe an idea about something your team could do at work, or an idea that would make work a little bit more fun, or make something you have to do in the office a little bit more efficient or productive. And you go in and you tell a few people about the idea, and they look at you in that strange way, as if to go, "Yeah, I'm really not sure that's a good idea." And then something strange happens, because a couple of days later, or maybe a couple of weeks later even, someone else comes along with the exact same idea that you had. And when they say it, that group of people that roundly rejected it when it was your idea are now embracing enthusiastically the very same idea. And you're just kind of thinking, why? I've been talking about that for weeks. So these kind of two factors, this idea that increasingly it seems to be the case that what's being said isn't either being paid attention to, or doesn't seem to matter so much for some people. And then this idea that we've all got these experiences where we can say something and it gets kind of rejected, it falls on deaf ears. Someone else can say the same thing and it's, enthusiastically embraced. What is going on there? As persuasion and influence researchers, we've always been interested in what you put into the message that captures people's attention and gets them to move in your direction. But this doesn't seem to be about the message at all. This seems to be about the messenger. Some people seem to be able to say things and they are inherently trusted and believed, yet someone else can say the exact same thing and they are looked upon with suspicion or disdain or ridicule. And we were just kind of intrigued by that. Because the content of what's being spoken about doesn't change. Yeah. And that doesn't make sense. And so one of my colleagues that is now back at University College London, finishing his PhD, Joe, was working with me at the time. And, he's a pretty special kind of behavioral scientist. He is destined for future greatness. There's no doubt about that. And, he said, look, well, let's just take a look at it. We're researchers. There must be tons of research out there, where previous social psychologists, and behavioral scientists have actually looked at this phenomena. And whilst there were kind of pockets of research about the specific characteristics, no one in our field had actually taken a broader view and actually said, well, has anyone gathered up all these different traits and tried to kind of codify them? What are the factors that most reliably increase the odds that someone will be listened to, regardless of the wisdom or foolishness of what they were saying? And it hadn't been done for close to 4 decades. And we kind of thought, well, now is the time then we need to bring up to date this body of research, because so much has happened in these last 4 decades in terms of the advances in our science. And so those were the kind of things that kind of that confluence of events that kind of led us to spend the next 2 years, researching messenger effects, and then ended up writing this book.
One of my favorite ways to spread the message of our mission here at the Unmistakable Creative is through speaking. In the last 2 years, I've delivered keynotes and workshops to professional associations, large companies like Citibank and Meredith Corp, and even small ones, on how creativity can lead to better working environments, fuel innovation, and increase the bottom line. So if you think I'd be a fit for your upcoming event and want to learn more, visit speaking.unmistakablecreative.com and get in touch. Again, that's speaking.unmistakablecreative.com. Well, I'll share a story with you that I think that it just, as you described that, it triggered something, for me. So my sister, so my dad is notorious for not listening to me and my mom, and I'll tell you the story. So my dad bought this family portrait for my sister's wedding, and it's massive. It's so big that it's obnoxious, and he hung it above the fireplace. And my mom and I looked at it and were like, this is really obnoxious. You should get rid of it. And he was very adamant that it was a beautiful picture, which it is a beautiful picture, but it is massive. Like, it does not belong in any family room. Then my sister came over and she said, this is ridiculous. We're not the Trumps. Put this somewhere else. And he did. It was amazing. And the funny thing is, this is our joke with my sister. We're like, if we want my dad to do something, we just have her tell him.
Yeah.
Same thing with something as stupid as directions on the freeway. Okay. If we tell him, hey, this is the most effective route to get there, he'll stick to his guns. If my sister calls and says, this is a better way to do it, he'll say, yeah, that sounds about right. It's amazing. Like, same advice, just but coming from a different messenger. Yeah. And it makes me really, want to explore like why that happens. So
it's really frustrating as well, isn't it?
Of that. Yeah, no, it's incredibly annoying. Like I that's why.
Yeah. It's
just ridiculous.
Yeah. I had, someone said to me when we were partway through reading the book, that they said, this is what savvy parents understand. That, if they want their 15-year-old son to do his homework and to, buckle down and, learn what he needs to learn at school, they are the worst messengers in the world to deliver those messages. Much better to get the cute 15-year-old girl that lives next door to do it, and problem goes away. Yeah, that story of, so you and your mom
basically
and your
what we
sister,
need to do is employ cheerleaders to tell, kids to study, and suddenly, grades are going to skyrocket.
Well, that might be one way, but I think there's possibly, but there is a broader lesson there, isn't there? Which is, and I fall foul of this. I think we all do that. If you come up with an idea, or if you've got a point of view, or if you want to deliver a message to someone that you've constructed, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it, that you would be the best person to deliver that message, because after all, you constructed it. It's my idea, so no one knows more about this idea than me because it's my idea. So clearly I am the most knowledgeable person, the person best positioned to communicate that message. But that's not necessarily the case, because we don't just listen to the knowledge or the expertise of someone when we're determining whether or not we should listen to what they've got to say. There's a whole host of other inferences that we actually make. And so that's the inherent challenge here is that, when we construct these ideas, we kind of figure that because they're our ideas, we're the best messenger. And very often that's not the case. But that's a kind of difficult, there's a kind of ego depletion that occurs there, isn't there? You kind of like have to kind of, talk seriously to yourself and, give yourself a bit of a telling off and say, look, good idea. But, when it comes to big frames of family portraits above the fireplace, sister's the best person to deliver the message in that instance. Yeah.
That we're not the Trumps. That was the funniest way to put it for her. So I think that, you separated messengers into two categories, hard messengers and soft messengers. And, one of the things when I put the map in front of me, I thought, oh, wow, basically what it seems to me is that hard messengers are all defined by various status signals. And you name 4 of them. So let's start with each one. You talk about socioeconomic position. What impact does somebody's socioeconomic position have on their ability to deliver a message and whether somebody listens to them or not?
Yeah. So another way that people have communicated this to us is the kind of the rich and famous. Mm-hmm. And socioeconomic position essentially provides information to someone who wouldn't necessarily have all the data about who we are and whether we should be listened to, about our standing in society. And you see this in all sorts of different groups. Companies have CEOs. We have the captain of the soccer team and the basketball team and the baseball team. And, those people that occupy a higher rank in an organization or a group or in a family, such as your sister when it comes to communicating to your father, for example, we afford them greater attention. And one of the reasons that we do that is we'd like to believe this notion of a just world, that, those people that have gotten on well in life, that have occupied a higher socioeconomic position, they've done so through hard work, through endeavor, through experience and expertise. And so therefore they demand to be listened to more, because in a just world, those are the kind of people that do rise to the top. And I guess the classic everyday example is, when you meet someone for the first time, it's highly likely you're going to ask them, so what is it that you do? But when we ask that question, what we're really saying is, where on this social ladder are you compared to me, so I can make some judgments about you? That's kind of largely what that, hey, so what is it that you do for a living, or what is it you do, question actually comes from. And when we see certain signals of elevated position, in certain circumstances, we might be more inclined to listen to what that person has to say, regardless of the truth or wisdom or foolishness of what they might have to say, the content of their message.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the thing that to me has always been really interesting is that it's really easy to overlook context in these situations. Like, people can hear me talk to people like you, and, I was talking to a guy named Douglas Vigliotti yesterday. We're having, conversation about very similar content. And I said, it took me a long time to realize that many of the things that I am talking about, writing about, are all based on coming from a place of privilege. I didn't grow up in a ghetto with bullets being shot at me. I grew up the son of a college professor. That's a privileged life.
Right.
There's no question as to whether I was going to be educated. And I think that, in the online world in particular, we don't take context into consideration nearly enough when we get advice, because we think about, oh, well, this person says everybody should do this. This person's socioeconomic standing or even online status is, oh, they're, famous, they're making a ton of money, I should listen to what they have to say. Yeah. But you don't look deeper into the context at all.
That's exactly right. We don't. And one of the reasons for that is often we don't have the time. It's, and often we're faced with questions that we have to answer that are really tough questions, that there may not necessarily be an objective, correct direction to go in. So for example, who would make a good president of the United States? Would, is leaving the EU a good or a not so good decision for Great Britain? These are almost impossible questions to answer. And so what we'll often do when we're faced with these difficult questions is we'll ask a much easier question of ourselves, which is, who seems to know what they're talking about here? Right. And the way in which we decide whether someone knows what they're talking about isn't just a function of whether they have good information or whether they're a competent expert. We make all sorts of other judgments about them. And the really interesting thing about all of these traits, I mean, we're talking primarily at this moment in time about status and socioeconomic position, is that once we see that someone has this trait, or we infer that they have some socioeconomic position, it's very, very easy then to start to assume that they have all sorts of other things in their armory that have nothing to do with what got them that position in the first place. Yeah. I'm reminded of, your point about, people in social media and Twitter and, Facebook and Instagram, these sort of examples where we see, oh, here's someone with like 3.5 million followers, or 15 million followers, or however many it is. And, they're a great pop star. They're a great singer. So maybe it makes sense for me to listen to them when it comes to deciding whether I need a flu shot or something. That's ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous, when you put it in that context, these two unrelated things. Yeah. But Joe and I found a wonderful example of that. That it's probably quite an opportune moment to talk about this, given what's going on in China at the moment in terms of that the COVID-19 virus. But back a couple of years ago, there was a Chinese pop star who literally claimed on a WhatsApp type of function on their smartphone that anyone that got the flu vaccine that year, there was a 90% likelihood they would actually catch the flu. That makes absolutely no sense at all. It's contrary to all medical information and good science.
Right.
Yet there were enough people that believed them because they followed them, because they saw them in that position, that the Chinese health board had to scramble to contain this false news, this fake news that was actually coming out. And
wow.
That's what we're talking about here. You know, I don't know what the right thing to do is here.
Yeah.
So I'll look to this array of messengers, and here's someone that has this trait. So maybe they have an ability to comment about other things as well, and they clearly do not. But that's how automatic we often, use these ideas. You know, we see one thing in someone, and we assume all sorts of other things that are likely to be wrong, but they allow us to make these quick decisions, and particularly in these situations where we probably don't know what the objective and correct answer is.
So I don't know about you, but vacuuming is not one of those things that I ever look forward to doing. But as you know, your environment has a huge impact on your creativity. So I still like it to be clean wherever I'm living and working. But now it doesn't have to be something that you deal with. If you're like me and you grew up in the 80s, you probably fantasized about the day when cleaning your house would be like it was for the Jetsons, meaning you don't have to lift a finger. Well, the good news is that we're already kind of living in that future. And the easiest way to make sure your floors are clean every day is with the iRobot Roomba Robot Vacuum. It cleans up after itself. The Clean Base automatic dirt disposal takes convenience to a new level, automatically empties its own bin into an allergen lock bag that holds 60 days of debris and traps 99% of pollen, mold, and dust mites, so you can forget about vacuuming for months at a time. Let the Roomba clean for you instead. It learns your home, finds dirt, and empties itself on its own. It's got powerful cleaning performance made effortless. Remember, if it's not from iRobot, it's not a Roomba. To learn more, go to irobot.com/unmistakable.
Well, let's talk about two of the other ones: competence and dominance. We talked about the fact earlier. I know that you lecture at schools. One of the things that I have always found interesting, and this is always been one of my criticisms of business school, even though I have an MBA, is there are a lot of people. You're not one of them, obviously, because you work in corporate, but there are a lot of professors who've never actually set foot in an environment. And I'm like, wait a minute, why are you teaching something that you know nothing about? It's just theory. And so that makes me question their competence. And I'll give you one other example of competence, which kind of, goes back to this, and this is the most obnoxious and ridiculous example. So, and I'll preface with saying that, but I had a friend who once, she was exploring all sorts of entrepreneurial ideas, and she is like, well, I could be your dating coach. And in my mind, I thought, yeah, but every relationship you've had has been a failure. That would be like taking financial advice from a homeless person. I've never told her this, of course. But that was my thought. So let's talk about competence. Like, where do we overestimate somebody's competence? Where do we underestimate it? And why does it play the role that it does in who we listen to?
Yeah, I think you're onto something with the business school professors. Well, at least some of them. But again, like socioeconomic position and these other traits, competence is a reliable cue to determine quickly and easily whether or not someone is worth listening to. If I've got a problem with my health, I'll go to a doctor. If I've got a problem with my car, I'll go to a mechanic and hope that these people are competent. And sometimes the only way that I'm able to decide whether they're competent is to, basically look at them and see what they look like. Are they wearing the white coat? Are they, adorned with the stethoscope around their shoulder? Does the mechanic have a certificate on his garage wall? These kind of things. So we're using these, trappings or signals around that messenger to determine their competence. And the thing about competent people is they do have what in psychology we'd call instrumental value. They have something we don't have, which is a particular piece of knowledge about something we are currently interested in and that could help us, has some value to us. So that's essentially what's actually going on. But what's, I guess, kind of, surprising to some people and ludicrous in some of the examples is how when we see that signal of competence, how quickly we are then to kind of just believe what they say and, go off and follow their advice, often when it absolutely makes no sense. It's kind of interesting that, when we hear or see a competent individual speak, often what would be irrelevant if someone else said it, we're quite happy to kind of accept as fact. And that's where it starts to get problematic.
Okay, so you're, a professor. This is where my thing is. Do you think anybody who's never started a company has any business teaching entrepreneurship? Like, that's insane. Like, to call that person competent because they stand up in front of a room and have 3 letters on the end of their name is ridiculous. I can tell you this from the first hand. This is one I wrote a blog post about this. I said, business school doesn't teach you a damn thing about how to run a business. It teaches you how to be an employee in somebody else's.
Yeah, potentially. Although I do feel like, I probably have to stand up for some of my colleagues here and kind of defend them somewhat. You could make the argument that what it might do is, give you good information about what not to do. Because they're, if they're gathering up examples of failures, and they'll certainly give you good models and actually some of the more mechanical aspects of, business, like, cash flow forecast, balance sheets, these kind of things, all this stuff that most of us don't understand or can't read, or, I've never been able to get a balance sheet to balance.
Me either.
But you get the theories of it. But you're right, until you've rolled your sleeves up and done it yourself, that's all you have. You have theory, but that's what academics are, aren't they? At the end of the day, I once heard, in fact, actually it was Bob Cialdini, I think it was, that actually once said that, academics are those folks that aren't interested or happy with anything that works in practice until they've tried it out in theory.
Wow.
And
let's
that's
talk about the other one, dominance. What do you mean by dominance? Is it authority? Is it, how does dominance show up? And
so dominance, dominance in the context of our research is, it describes those people that are dispositionally of a mindset that everything is a competition and to the winner goes the spoils. The kinds of people that when they come into the room, they consume the space in the room. They are overbearing, often bullying even. The people that aren't interested in collaboration, they're not interested in signaling their benevolence. They're interested in signaling their position, their power, and to them, everything is a competition, and to the winner goes the spoils. But what's really, I guess, interesting about this is, because 2020 now, you kind of think about those people and you think, well, why would we want those people in our families, in our workplaces, in our societies? There's no value for them. But what's really interesting is how young an age we become alert to the attention-grabbing features of dominant characters. From as early an age as 10 months old, there have been studies that show, if you put, young toddlers in front of a screen where there are these 2 animated shapes, and one of them is clearly dominant, and the other is clearly, is being bullied by this dominant character, and then they play a game, and the bullying character loses and kind of recedes into the background, so the underdog wins. The surprise, this is measured by eye gaze at the screen, of these 10 to 12-month-old toddlers is just so acute. If from the earliest of ages, it's almost installed in us that to the victor goes the spoils. No surprise that, in later life, and again, we're talking about context here being important, but no surprise that, we sometimes look to these dominant characters. Particularly when we are in situations of, perhaps uncertainty or anxiety. That's when, the dominant messenger or leader is most likely to thrive, which will probably, I guess, raise in your listeners' minds, the thought that, well, do certain dominant characters deliberately induce fear in order for their dispositional personality to be the one that's likely to be called upon in that instance. And I do see that. I think that's entirely the case.
I think about North Korea when you say that. So let's talk about attractiveness. The thing that was kind of going through my mind when I was thinking about attractiveness is, as a single guy, when I go on a date, I realized that it's really easy to judge somebody based on first impressions, and attractiveness definitely skews that. At least it has in my experience. That I realize my first impressions are often inaccurate, and that it's a person's character over time or actions over time that really reveal their character. Why is that? Like, why do we fall victim to that? And is there anything we can do about it? Is there any way we can, prevent our emotions from clouding our judgment when it comes to attractiveness?
Yeah, that's good questions. I mean, it is tough. Well, let's take the easy one first. Why do we do this? Why are we attracted to attractive people? And the simple answer is that from an evolutionary perspective, attractive people have what we call mate value. That ability to ensure that the best genes, those that are blessed, gets passed down the evolutionary chain. And so, we are alert to those kind of attractive cues, particularly those facial ones, of symmetry and youthfulness, and interestingly, averageness as well, which does surprise people because they think, well, why would an attractive person have an average face? And well, it is actually the case that they do, and it's not because of something that they actually have about their physical demeanor in that instance. It's actually more about what they don't have. Having an average face essentially is signaling, there's nothing wrong with me genetically here in that instance, which is important. If you consider the mate value aspect of it. But where it does become problematic, of course, is that that's a single snapshot decision that we make within, a matter of tens of milliseconds, whether someone is attractive or not. It takes longer to understand who they are as a person, their warmth, their compatibility, their values, these kind of things. And that actually takes a lot longer. But it's not just when it comes to choosing mates that the attractiveness bias or halo kicks in. It's been shown by actually a pair of economists in the US that you can even put a value on lifetime's earnings of being born, above average in attractiveness. It's about 10 to 15% compared to a norm, or a mean rather, across a lifetime. Attractive people, more likely to get the job, get better grades at school. Being born genetically blessed is a real advantage.
Hey, it's Srini. I hope you're liking this episode of The Unmistakable Creative. Did you know that every Sunday, our community manager, Melina, sends out 10 key takeaways from episodes like this one? All you have to do to receive it is sign up for our newsletter. Just visit unmistakablecreative.com/newsletter and you'll get them delivered right to your inbox. Again, that's unmistakablecreative.com/newsletter.
Okay. So this is kind of interesting. So sometimes you see attractive people who have incredibly low self-esteem. They don't see themselves as attractive, and other people do. I had a friend in college once who told me this, and I thought it was I remember it pissed me off at the time, and now I look back and realize how maybe right he was. He was this short, bald guy who didn't have any qualms about walking up to any girl. And he once told me, he said, man, if I had your looks and your height, I would be killing it. And he said, you, on the other hand, have no confidence. You're fucked. And, and I remember thinking about that. And I remember it made me really angry, but I kind of looked at it and, looking back now, if you put the two of us together, probably he has some validity in saying that. So I wonder about that. And also, is it possible, just given that, to change our perceived level of attractiveness to somebody of the opposite sex, or even a potential romantic partner, whether it's, not just the opposite sex?
Sure. Well, that's pretty blunt feedback they gave you there.
Yeah, I mean, but it wasn't wrong.
Yeah, no. So one of the things that's actually going on there is what I'd regard as almost like a contrast effect. So although we have these I guess, primary signals that determine whether someone is attractive or not. What I think amplifies those effects are how we then compare them to someone else. So if we see two people side by side, it's a lot easier to determine who is the more attractive and the less attractive than if we just see a single evaluation in that instance. And so,
so go out with your ugly friends. In other words,
well, this is it. Or if you're a guy and you want to appear tall in a bar, it helps to have short friends because it's not like people are going out with tape measures and going, well, what is he? Is he kind of like 6'2"? Is he 6'3"? They're largely kind of like, well, look at the person that he or she is with, and compared to those people, that's how we make our judgments. In that instance. So that comparison. So there's one way immediately that you can probably boost your perceived height is to have shorter friends or slightly less attractive pals, these kind of things. So, if you are in that game, and you really need to consider the ethics and the responsibility of actually doing this. But yeah, I mean, oftentimes you don't necessarily have to change yourself. You need to change who you are being compared to.
That's hilarious. Like, can you imagine just like calling friends? Like, you're the shortest person I know. You want to go out tonight and be my wingman?
What was that really famous? No, this is just kind of interesting. Is that this never made the book, but we did have a look at for this chapter this concept of wing women. Mm-hmm. The idea that if a guy is out and there's he has some attractive women around him, they are actually become more attractive to other single women in that same environment. And so there are websites and services where
I've heard about
a guy can essentially employ a wing woman and as a result significantly increase his dating success because other women will look and go, well, if she's interested in him, what does he have? What is it about him that I might be interested in too? There's as you say, we've got the internet now. You can pretty much buy any service you like.
So this actually raises one other question about race and skin color. I wonder about, as somebody who is a non-white person living in the US, and I remember the dating coach that I did some work with, he actually wrote a blog post about this, talking about the role that, your skin color can play in your dating life, particularly in online dating. What, do you know anything about that? Like, how can I spin that to my advantage is literally the question I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. So, I mean, towards the end of the book, we do talk about different contexts where kind of like universally found contexts where these messenger traits are, more likely to play out. So race, for example, culture more generally, gender as well. Although some of these things are actually changing, so what's really interesting, there's some research that's actually recently come to publication that has looked at perceived competence across the genders over the last close to 50 years now. And what's interesting is that typically the last 35, 40 years or so, men have always traditionally been seen as more competent than women, and you can track those graphs. But the line has shifted. The line's met. And now, if anything, the evidence is suggesting that women are seen as more competent than men. So that's changing. But yeah, so we do talk about those kind of aspects. They're kind of important, but the traits themselves transcend those contexts because they are largely, well, they're not largely, they are human in nature, and regardless of our skin color, our gender, our cultural upbringing, our human machinery largely operates in exactly the same way.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the soft messengers. We've spent so much time talking about the hard ones, I think, just because I have so many questions about them. But in the interest of time, I want to focus on two of them, vulnerability and charisma.
Right.
Vulnerability is an interesting thing for me because I think Brene Brown definitely popularized the whole idea of vulnerability. But sometimes I think that we confuse vulnerability with seeking pity. Like I see this online quite a bit, and I've been as guilty of it as most people, where it's just like, oh, this is me, airing my dirty laundry on Facebook. And knowing that, wow, if I do this, it'll get hundreds of likes or attention. And now, of course, I'm much more mindful about that. But why is that? What is that about? Why is it that we listen to somebody who is willing to have public vulnerability almost to a fault sometimes?
Yeah. Well, just briefly to your point, because I think you're right, that self-pitying kind of character, it does strike me as being more tactical in nature than authentic. You know what I mean? If I'm doing it to get a like, or if I'm doing it to kind of just get some instant feedback that people are listening to me in that instance, I see that as largely tactical. But more broadly, it's actually, and Brené Brown is exactly right about this. To express a vulnerability requires some considerable strength, because essentially what you're doing is you're saying, I don't have dominance. I don't have socioeconomic position. I don't necessarily have attractiveness. I'm not necessarily seen as charismatic. All these other messenger traits aren't available to me. But in order to be heard, I essentially need to open myself up to expressing some downside to my situation, or some weakness that I actually have, or just some need. And what compounds that is this idea that when we know that we're in a position of need, and we, our best route to achieving that is to kind of open ourselves up, be vulnerable, we significantly underestimate other people's likelihood to want to help us, to say yes to us. And I think one of the reasons for that is that we primarily focus our attention on the economic costs that they will then incur if they try and help us. Whereas in reality, and we all know this, when someone comes to us and we can see that they're in a position of want or need genuinely, our desire is not to start to calculate the odds of us helping them in terms of lost resources and our time. Our overwhelming desire in that instance is a human, social one, to want to connect with them and help as best we can. So we typically underestimate the likelihood that people will respond when we signal these wants, these needs, when we ask them. So, an immediate, I think, takeaway from that insight is we should be really asking people for help more often. And actually, if we do, I'm pretty sure that whole reciprocal exchange will actually start to play out as well, and they'll be more willing to come to us as well. So, that's to express a vulnerability. You're essentially trusting others, sometimes strangers, with your innermost kind of frailties, and that strikes me as being an incredibly strong thing to do. And for some of us, sometimes that's all that's available to us. But I think the good news is, from a lot of the research, that the fact that we are underestimating people's likelihood that they will want to help us. So there's a silver lining there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this idea of charisma. I feel that charisma is one of those things that is so sort of misunderstood and mysterious. In some contexts, I feel charismatic, in others, I feel like a bumbling idiot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you define charisma? What role does context play in all of that? And what impact does charisma have on who we listen to?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think you're absolutely right about the challenge sometimes that we have in describing exactly what it is. The best description to date, I now have an updated scientific one, but until like a couple of years ago, we used to describe charisma as being a little bit like hardcore pornography, insofar as I know it when I see it. But then when you said to people, well, okay, if you know it when you see it, describe it to me, they're like, and then you get this kind of hodgepodge of different, descriptions. But it was, I think, 2016 that the scientific community finally came to some sort of consensus about what charisma is, and how it's made up. And it seems that there are three things that are important. And what's especially important about these three things is that they are all learnable. so we can all learn to be a little bit more charismatic. So the first is this ability that charismatic messengers seem to be able to coalesce their audience towards one unifying vision. When they speak to others, they're not speaking to individuals in an audience. They are essentially marshalling that audience behind a single unifying vision that everyone can sign up to. We're going in this direction. And what's really interesting about the impact that actually has on audiences is that it kind of induces a form of awe in their audiences. And awe is really interesting because when we feel that sense of awe, we tend not to think about our personal needs in that moment in time. We tend to kind of look outside of ourselves and think more broadly to the wider group. And so those communicators that are able to tap into a collective vision that's important to that group and communicate it in that way, that's tick number one for charisma. Tick number two is what our psychologists call surgency. Surgency is kind of linked to extroversion in a way. It's this ability to be able to kind of communicate in a positive, uplifting way. And some of the ways that they actually do that is through their body language. So for example, we find that TED Talk presenters, let's say we take two TED Talk presenters and they're talking about the same subject, maybe leadership, for example. The content's largely the same, the messaging is largely the same, but the presenter who's most likely to get the larger share of the views, we found, is the presenter that uses about twice as many hand gestures as his comparable peer.
Wow.
And what's really interesting about this is, and we don't get to talk so much about this, but it's a kind of really interesting, fascinating insight from those studies, is even when you turn those presenters, the videos of them, into animated stick men, so you can't see their facial features, you can't see if they're male or female, all you can see is the kind of the mechanical movement, that finding holds true. So there's something there about that positivity and that hand move. And the third thing, so tick number two. Tick number three is the ability to speak in metaphors and employ what we would call quick thinking, which isn't the same as intelligence. So, this ability to come back with a quick retort, or a snappy, pithy one-liner, or to use metaphors in their language to kind of build those kind of emotional connections, So, we found, for example, we looked back at inauguration speeches of US presidents, and we find a clear pattern that those presidents that in their first inauguration speech used plentiful metaphors and analogies were much, much more likely to serve a second term than those presidents who really didn't use that many metaphors and analogies were a little bit more, just kind of straight down the line with their speech, a little bit more politic than polished in that instance. So that's kind of what makes up charisma. And I think the really important thing to take away from me there is this idea that we don't have to look on enviously at certain charismatic people and think, oh, I wish I was born with the skill that they actually had. Assuming that, we're willing to make that commitment and live through that promise and that strength and conviction, all of us can learn some like tips and tricks from the inside to come across as a little more charismatic.
So I think the thing that struck me the most, and we'll get wrapping up here, but you said that it was the ability to speak to a group at large as opposed to one person. And the reason I think that stood out to me was because one of the things that you will often hear about people like Bill Clinton and other people that I've talked to, they say that what makes a person seem charismatic to them, almost hypnotic, is they will talk to you like you're the only person in the room, even if there's 1,000 people there.
Yeah.
When you're in an individual conversation.
Yeah. Exactly. That's the kind of feeling that we actually have. They're talking to everyone in the room. They're talking at such a truistic level often, but it sounds like they're talking to me. I can buy into this, but they can't just be talking to me. because there's 999 other people in the room that are also thinking he's clearly just talking to me. So he's clearly talking to that group in that instance. It's a real skill to be able to, it requires planning actually, to be able to go into an audience and actually think, what are the unifying features or factors or values of this particular audience? And how do I craft, my proposition, my presentation, my stump speech, if that's what it is, to speak to so many people that it feels like each and every one of them feels that I'm just speaking to them. It's a real skill, but it can be learned.
Wow. This has been fascinating. I'm so glad that we got a chance to talk and I got to ask you all these questions about the book. So I want to finish with one final question, which is how we finish all our interviews with the Unmistakable Creative. What do you think it is that makes somebody or something unmistakable?
Sorry, I just missed that last piece there.
What do you think it is that makes somebody or something unmistakable?
Yeah. Well, the obvious answer for me is that there's probably something aligned to one of these messenger traits, but and so I'm trying to think of something that isn't so obvious actually, and actually there is something. What makes someone unmistakable to me is that person that is they're with you after they've gone. There's something about them. It's something they've said. It's something they've done. It's the way that they've looked at a particular idea or feature or something. And you just think, how did they think about that? And that's genius. I've never really considered it. They just flip the coin the other way, and you suddenly look at something in a different way, and you're kind of left. There's sometimes you get to meet someone, and towards the end of the day, you're still thinking about, wow, that was. They just seem to kind of still be there. That's clearly, that unmistakable trait. I think that I actually see. So I do see that sometimes, and I think it is a creative thing. It's very easy. We started out here actually, didn't we? We were talking about how easy it is to kind of, plan to do something, but we kind of fall back on our own habits. So that that individual that comes in and is able to just to kind of interrupt our thinking in such a way that you're still thinking about it later in the day, maybe the following week. I think that's a pretty good sign of being someone that's unmistakable.
Amazing. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us and share your story and your wisdom with our listeners. This has been really, really fascinating. I am going to have to go back through it and dig it apart and go find some really short friends to go start hanging out with.
Indeed. You were going to talk to me about teaching, I think. What was your point about teaching?
We did touch on it a little bit. I mean, we could have gotten probably a lot deeper into the whole idea of teaching, but where can people find out more about you, your work, the book, and everything else that you're up to?
Yeah, well, the book is called Messengers, Who We Listen To, Who We Don't, and Why. For anybody that's actually interested in what their preferred messenger style or trait is, there's a test that they can take. It's free. It probably requires 6 or 7 minutes of your time, and you can follow the links at messengersthebook.com, where you can also start reading the book. That we've put the first chapter up there, and if you like the book and you'd like to continue reading, then it's available, in those all the usual places. But take the test. That might be a good starting point.
Amazing. And for everybody listening, we will wrap the show with that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Unmistakable Creative Podcast. While you were listening, were there any moments you found fascinating, inspiring, instructive, maybe even heartwarming? Can you think of anyone, a friend or a family member who would appreciate this moment? If so, take a second and share today's episode with that one person, because good ideas and messages are meant to be shared.